Hey, fourth grade. We are back for chapter 14 in the Aurora County All-Stars. The end of chapter 13 gave us a lot of new information. We learned that Mr. Norwood Boyd was friends with Pip, Francis's grandfather. We also learned a little bit about him as a boy and in his youth, and the fact that he refused to play baseball because his good friend Pip wasn't allowed to play because he was black. So a lot of little new themes are coming up in this story. Some themes around social justice, some themes around stuff we've talked about in class surrounding the civil rights movement. So House is starting to learn a little bit more about the character of Mr. Norwood Boyd, the man he read to up until the end of his life, who he doesn't seem to know a ton about. So it sounds like he's learning about him now, after he's passed away. All right, here we go. The beginning of chapter 14 starts with a quote by Willie Mays, the center fielder of the San Francisco Giants. "I always enjoyed playing ball, and it didn't matter to me whether I played with white kids or black. I never understood why an issue was made of who I played with." House's heartbeat thumped in his ears. I didn't love him. I didn't know anything about him. "You visited him every day for one whole year," said Pip, "and you never found out nothing about him?" I didn't ask him questions." "Why didn't you, House?" House thought about it. "Well, he was sick." Pip nodded his old gray head and stroked his chin with 2 fingers. "I see. Yes, he was sick. But his mind was good. Where is your sense of wonder, House? You missed the opportunity to know a great man." They stood in the great man's house in the dark, the silence between them. House tried to think of a reply. "He scared me at first." "Folks are scared of what they don't know," said Pip. "What else?" "My father told me to come," said House. "He said I could be useful to an old man who was going to die soon." "I know what you did," Pip said. "I set it up with Norwood, and then with your daddy." "You did?" "I did." The flashlight bobbled along the wall with no particular aim, bouncing like a spotlight on Norwood Boyd's life in pictures as Pip talked. "Doc McCree spoke with your daddy about it a year ago, when we lost some of our help. My granddaughter Gladys and her family moved to Jackson. You know that story. Doc McCree and I knew Norwood was going to need more watching over in that gloaming hour before supper and bedtime. Norwood told us you'd be perfect for the job." "He did?" House fidgeted. "You're wondering why, ain't ya?" "He didn't even know me." "He knew you." "How?" "Now you got questions," said Pip. "Now when it's too late to ask Norwood about him." "He knew my mother," said House. He'd show Pip he knew something. "Yes, he did," said Pip. "We all knew your mama very well." The answer surprised him. In the shadowy hallway, House blinked back tears. Everyone knew his mama but him. But of course, they would have known her. "Your mama was special," Pip said. Hearing his mother was special to someone else was more than House was ready for. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. His nose began to drip. "Sorry by itself doesn't do anybody any good, son. You gotta open your mind, House Jackson. You gotta wonder. You gotta open your heart." Pip aimed the flashlight beam at the library door. "You got business in there?" House shoved his hands in his pockets and shook his head no. "I think you do," said Pip. "Norwood said you'd be here the night he passed. He said to wait for you. Now I have." He handed House the flashlight. "Electric was canceled today. They cut off the juice." He walked to the front door where his figure was an inky spot in the darkness. "I told you that baseball story for a reason, son. It's up to you to figure out the meaning of it. So I'll leave you to your business. Good night." He turned to go, hesitated, and then spoke one more time. He kept his back to House. I know you don't like my girl right now. I know she made it hard for you last year. Yes, sir. She didn't mean to. And with that, parting shots walked out the front door of Mr. Norwood Boyd's home and shut the door behind him, leaving House alone with only Eudora Welty and a hallway of old photographs for company. That's the end of chapter 14. So fourth graders, it sounds like a lot of people knew House's mom, and House doesn't even feel like he knew her very well or can remember her very well because she died when he was so young. But it also shows us more about House's character. House is pretty quiet so far in this story. And it really is apparent now that Pip is pointing out to him, you spent a whole year with this man every single day, and you never got to know him, and now it's too late. So that's sort of a lingering feeling that we're left with at the end of the chapter. I also want to point out the entire book until now has all happened in one day. We're on page 96, chapter 15, and all of this has just happened in one day. I love that Deborah Wiles, the author of this book, is able to drag out one day with that amount of detail, and for us, the reader, to have so many questions and to be wondering about so many things. That's just a lot of writing for just one day. It's pretty amazing, her gift with words. All right, I'll see you next time for chapter 15. Bye.